Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian Podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and Libertarian Institute. So we've made it to another end of another week where pretty much the whole news cycle was dominated by our current impeachment light-ish sort of thing that's going on right now. And I devoted the whole last episode to that, so if you missed that one, go back and listen to that. But since I recorded that, there's not been a lot of really big developments just yet. There is some stuff that's kind of percolating below the surface that I think over the next week is going to start turning into more of a story. And there is one particular story going on right now that's kind of breaking my brain about how conservative media is taking the Joe Biden trip to Ukraine from back in 2015 and spinning it into something that it wasn't and was never understood to be. But I will save that for another time because that's one that's still kind of evolving too. And I'm trying to see kind of how that's going to completely flesh out. But I do want to talk about two other stories that did happen this week, and kind of bringing it back to the idea of cancel culture, because both of these stories kind of revolve around the idea. I mean, one of them is blatantly cancel culture, the Carson King controversy. And I also want to talk about how one of my favorite punching bags, Sarah Jeong, did actually manage to get herself fired-ish from the New York Times. So let's go ahead and start with the Carson King, Aaron Calvin controversy. And I want to take it back all the way to the beginning of how Carson King became famous in the first place, because I think it's really important to understand why this is so fucking ridiculous. Like, this is just, I honestly cannot believe any news outlet ran with this story. But anyway, and I will also explain this for my non-sports ball fans, and especially my non-college football sports ball fans, to kind of try to give you an idea of really what happened here, because it's something that started in one place and went completely somewhere else, and now it's just a total mess. But anyway, Carson King, 24-year-old kid, goes to the University of Iowa, and what happened is College Game Day, ESPN College Game Day, went to the University of Iowa to do one of their live recordings. Now, if you don't know what College Game Day is, it is during the college football season. ESPN visits different college campuses across the country, and they do College Game Day from each individual campus. And it is a huge deal to have College Game Day come to your school. Like, everybody shows up. I mean, there's like tens of thousands of people that show up to watch and participate in the live recording of it. And it's a very big deal. It's a fun thing. It's a cool thing to do. Everybody comes out. It's a good time. But one of the traditions that's come up around College Game Day is the signs. And what a lot of people that go do is you make signs, of whether they're funny or mean or ridiculous or whatever. You try to make a sign that catches the eye of the College Game Day camera crew so that they put your sign on ESPN on College Game Day. So then you're on ESPN and your sign's on ESPN. And it's just a fun, silly thing to do. It's not anything that's meant to be anything huge or major or dramatic or make any kind of political statement or anything like that. It's just a fun little tradition that has sprung up around College Game Day. And yeah, so Carson King makes a sign that he's run out of money for Busch Light. Please send money. And he puts his Venmo on the sign, his Venmo address. And so people start Venmoing him money. Like, they start sending him beer money. And he gets to the point where it's like a lot of money. Like, all of a sudden, we're talking like tens of thousands of dollars people are sending him. So he's like, I can't keep this money. And of course, at this point, the whole thing's gone viral. Anheuser-Busch heard about it. Venmo heard about it. And both companies promised to match whatever donations he got in through his Venmo. And he decided that he's going to donate this money to the University of Iowa's Children's Hospital. So by the time everything is said and done, he raises over $1 million for the Children's Hospital. So like we're talking big, big money here. And obviously this is just like a feel-good story, right? Like just like a fun, silly sign goes viral and it grabs a bunch of people's attention and he ends up raising over $1 million for a children's hospital. Like that should be the end of that, right? Like that's a great story. It's not the end of it. The Des Moines Register decides that they are going to run a profile on Carson King, and they have Aaron Calvin write it. According to Aaron Calvin, he was told to do a quote-unquote background check on Carson King, including his social media accounts. So he finds these tweets from King. Now, mind you, King at this point is 24 years old. He's an adult now. He finds tweets from when this kid was 16 years old. And apparently it's quoting lines from the Tosh.0 show that are inflammatory. They are racist. But they're from when he was 16 years old. And this is a kid who just raised $1 million for a children's hospital. And you would think, now you would think any normal, logical, sane person, whether it be the writer or the editors or somebody at Des Moines Register would be like, you know what? Let's not put these tweets in the story. Like, let's not be that person. No, nobody did that. They put the tweets in the fucking story and ran it. I don't know what these people expected to happen, but it blew up on the internet. Everybody was pissed at Des Moines Register for doing this to this kid, and rightly so. Because, like I said, this is just a nice, feel-good story. Like, why did you have to do this? Like, why did you have to even go there and bring up all this stuff to try to smear somebody who just donated a whole bunch of money that he didn't even have to donate? Like, he could have kept all that money that was Venmoed to him. No, he donates it to a children's hospital. And y'all want to do this. So, everybody got pissed. And so, the inevitable happened, which, I mean, I don't see why nobody saw this coming, but people started going back into Aaron Calvin's old tweets and found racist material in his old tweets. And so they started posting that up on Twitter. And then eventually Des Moines Register, because nobody learns anything from anything ever, apparently, instead of just pulling the piece and apologizing to Carson King, which would have been the correct thing to do, they fire Aaron Calvin for the tweets. Yeah. So that happened. And it seems like a tempest in a teapot, but it's really not, because you have, I mean, this wasn't like somebody, like some rando person on Twitter deciding that they're going to go back into this kid's past tweets and pull this shit up. It's an actual legitimate news organization thought this was a good idea and ran the piece. Like, what the fuck? What? It's horrible. And so what ended up happening even after that is once the piece dropped, apparently Carson King had a deal with Anheuser-Busch where Anheuser-Busch was going to put out some sort of merchandise or something based around Carson King and his sign, and the proceeds of that were going to go to charity. So now you've screwed charities out of even more money, because now Anheuser-Busch broke off their relationship with Carson King over these old tweets from, again, when he was 16 years old. And it's just like, I argue anybody who says that cancel culture doesn't exist, because that's what just happened to this kid. And like I made the point when I made the last cancel culture episode, not everybody has the platform to pivot and to be able to be okay that some people have. And obviously, this is just a 24-year-old college kid who went viral for a silly sign on College Game Day. Like, this isn't a writer. This isn't an actor. This isn't an activist. This isn't somebody who had a large platform to begin with. And so somebody, like, I don't understand why. Why do we have to do this to people? But ultimately, the whole thing, just nobody learned anything. Nobody has learned anything from anybody being canceled. And you still have people, I mean, feel however you want to feel about how Erin Calvin was treated. I mean, you do open yourself up to that kind of treatment when you do it to somebody else, especially somebody else who really, really, really didn't deserve it. And of course, Erin Calvin is now trying to present himself as a victim of a right-wing social media mob because of freaking course. I can't with this. Like, can everybody just please stop? Can we just please stop this? Like, just nobody cancel anybody. Like, leave tweets that people made when they were teenagers alone. Like, whatever. You're an adult now. You said dumb shit when you were a teenager. I said dumb shit when I was a teenager. Everybody did. Just most of us are old enough to have not been around for the time of social media where we put all of this dumb shit on the internet and then people can now, like, go index it from all the way over here in the future. So that story happened. And it was just, it's a perfect example of cancel culture and when cancel culture backfires. And I would like to think somebody's going to learn something, but I doubt it. Like, we're just going to do this over and over and over again till everybody's canceled. And then, well, I guess we'll live in a post-cancellation world then, but it's just mean. Like, that was just mean for no reason. Like, I don't even understand why Des Moines Register ran that story. Like, nobody in editorial thought, hey, maybe no. But anyway, moving on to cancellation of a different sort. This was kind of more of a self-cancellation on Sarah Jeong's part. And I want to go back and kind of explain, for those of you who might be new here and don't know who Sarah Jeong is or missed the original cancel culture episode, Sarah Jeong got hired to be on the New York Times editorial board despite having these tweets that were very derogatory towards white people, specifically white men. And it became a huge controversy last year when she got hired by the New York Times, and everybody went and pulled up the tweets and put them back out there. And the New York Times was like, yes, we already know about the tweets, whatever, we're not firing her. Anyway, so moving forward to this past week, where Sarah Jeong still managed to tweet something that actually did get her fired. And I want to read the tweet because it's funny when you think that this is the thing. Like, it's totally understandable that this is the thing that got her fired, but this is the thing that got her fired. So the tweet in question was actually a tweet in response to somebody who had tweeted and tagged Sarah Jeong in on a tweet about how they didn't feel like canceling your subscription to the New York Times in protest was an effective protest because, you know, it's just one person and who cares? Like, the New York Times doesn't care if one person cancels their subscription, whatever. This was her response. You're wrong. New York Times does pay attention to subscriber cancellations. It's one of the metrics for outrage that they take to distinguish between real outrage and superficial outrage. What subscribers say can back up dissenting views inside the paper about what it should do and be. All right, let's break this down into two parts. The first part of her tweet is correct. I mean, obviously, newspapers are a business. They do care if you stop giving them money. So, and whether or not they use that as any kind of metric for what they should and should not be covering, I don't know. I don't really know how the New York Times works internally, but of course they care about their subscriber numbers. It would be stupid to say otherwise. It's the second part of the tweet that got her fired. And that is the part that basically, and let me try to back this up a little bit. There's been reports, even before Sarah Jeong was hired to be on the editorial board, that there are different factions within the New York Times between the editorial section and the straight news section about how the New York Times should be as a publication. And obviously the news side wants to keep it as fair and impartial as possible so they can report straight news, because that's ostensibly their job, is to report the news. And the editorial side has long been kind of fighting this battle to pull the paper as a whole into a more progressive sort of slant. So that has been something it's been talked about. It's not really been made super duper public, but it's not really a secret either. Where Sarah screwed up is, first off, saying the quiet part out loud by telling everybody that, yes, there is actually an internal war going on at the New York Times as to how the paper should be presenting itself as a paper. And also, depending on how you want to look at what she said, either walking right up to the line or crossing the line into saying that you should cancel your subscription to the New York Times, which was Sarah Jeong's employer, in order to help the more progressive-leaning side, of which Sarah was a part of, to influence what goes on internally at the New York Times. Pro tip: if you work for a company, do not be seen in public advocating that people should not patronize your employer. Don't do that. No. And this reply got picked up on and retweeted, and even I retweeted it at the time, saying that this seems like a really unwise thing to say in public. And not even 6 hours later, I don't think, it came out that, well, how it is she's no longer on the New York Times editorial board. She is a contracted contributor, which means she's not an official employee of the New York Times anymore. Basically, she's kind of one step up from a freelancer, which is kind of the most elegant go fuck yourself I've seen in a long time. Like, it would have been better if they just let her go and just let it be at that. But being like a contract contributor, wow, that's a statement. Especially when you were on the New York Times editorial board. That is a demotion. But I wanted to talk about that story because it seems like it would be wrong of me to not tell you the end of the saga of Sarah Jeong being on the New York Times editorial board, because I have talked about it so much. But a thing that I've always wondered, and this is kind of the first time I can recall seeing somebody actually really get in trouble for this, is the bumper crop of writers who got their come up in that really weird Twitter era where bashing white people, white men, making those kind of performative tweets was a way to become famous. How would those people pivot when you do get a quote-unquote legitimate job at a quote-unquote respectable outlet, as far as how you present yourself publicly on Twitter? Because to me, and this is my stance on this, and this is my thought on this, and it's not strictly just getting a legit job, but also this comes with developing a larger following or getting this stupid blue check or anything like that. Once you reach a certain stage, you do have to think about how you present publicly and what you do and do not say on social media, where literally millions upon millions upon millions of people can see you, including your employer. Obviously, Sarah didn't quite get the memo that when you work for the New York Times, maybe don't slag the New York Times in public while you're on their payroll. But there is that schism and there's that split, and I can kind of almost understand where the Sarah Jeongs of the world are coming from, because you've built your personal platform by being a certain way. Like, your personal brand is you do XYZ. How is that supposed to jibe when in your professional life, you need to present in a much more moderate, polished, adult sort of way? Like, how is that dichotomy going to fix itself? And obviously, Sarah screwed up and got herself insanely demoted. But I wonder if this is not something that we're going to see more of going forward. And you can't really call it canceling. And I will say, on the flip side of that argument, when outlets hire these people who are internet famous for being a certain way, you kind of know what you're getting into. So I wouldn't say that outlets are completely blameless when the people that they hire act a certain way, when they acted a certain way before you hired them. I do think that there's nothing wrong with there being an expectation that you kind of clean it up a little bit when you get the fancy job and now you're representing a company. Like, now you can't just be an idiot on Twitter because now you're somebody. And like I said, it's the same way with developing a large following or gaining some kind of legitimacy in any other way. It's like, now you're not just some random jackwagon on Twitter. Like, you're somebody. Like, you're somebody whose opinions apparently are special enough to be warranted to be followed by a lot of people. And it's something I even think of too, because I mean, I'm not saying I'm super duper famous on the internet or anything, but I know there are people that follow me who are like legitimate, respectable people in their industries and in their fields. And so it's kind of like, okay, I know these people are looking at what I say, and it's not that I changed myself, but sometimes you think before you mash that tweet button. Once you reach a certain level, you gotta stop to think and realize that sometimes you have tens of thousands of people who are reading your tweets. And it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should just leave that one in drafts. But ultimately, that is the end of the tale of Sarah Jeong and her time at the New York Times. Kinda, sorta. I'm interested to see, like, they put her on this contract position. I wonder if they're still planning on, publishing any of her work. Because, I mean, she did kind of shit on them. So we'll see how that pans out. But I did want to cover those two stories because, like I said, I did just do the one on cancel culture, and then these two happened. And especially the Carson King story, I'm like, that was just so egregiously wrong and just such a horrible thing to do to someone. And it's really just, it's an example of how cancel culture is real. Like, you can't say this doesn't exist. It absolutely does. And there's people that do it for sport or spite, or I don't even know. Like, I'm still baffled as to why the hell that story even ran in the first place. Like, I don't get it. But people do it. And people do it sometimes in very large, splashy ways like that. Sometimes it's much smaller to people that don't have any kind of clout and don't have any kind of influence, and so you don't really see them, and it doesn't become like a big, huge story. But it's just stop being idiots on the internet. I mean, I'm not going to tell people to stop tweeting because I'm not stopping tweeting. So, but just like think about how you present yourself and kind of what you do, and realize that there's actual people involved, and you might be held accountable for the shit you say too. So, glass houses, stones, yeah, worth thinking about here. So, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode up. It is a little bit of a shorter episode, but I did do a really long one on the impeachment one. So, this kind of all balances out. So, if you did make it this far, as always, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and Libertarian Institute. Take care, and until next time.